There's a growing body of research that is showing that sharing stories creates these bonds and almost syncs up people's brains in some way. By sharing your stories, you're communicating your values to your kids and grandkids.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Smart Women Talk. This is your host, Katana Abbott. Have you ever thought to yourself, I wish I had talked to grandma or your mom to get their story so you could connect the dots, but now it's too late because they're gone. If you have, then this is your lucky day, because in this episode, Lauren Ferrara, who is a former news anchor and founder of Why Wait Stories, shares how she transitioned from covering the nightly news to helping families capture the stories that matter most. So today we're talking about legacy, loss, and why there's no such thing as an ordinary life. Why capturing those personal stories now before it's too late is one of the most meaningful gifts that you can give to future generations. How to start documenting those stories today, even if you're not an expert at filming or writing. We're also going to learn about the surprising emotional and healing power that comes from storytelling, both for the person who's collecting the story and for the person who's sharing. So with that, let's get started. Lauren, welcome to the show. I'd love for you to share your story. How did you go from being an anchor person to doing films about families and their stories?
I did local news for almost 15 years. Started in West Texas, then I went to Las Vegas, then I was an anchor in Nashville for a couple of years, and then I landed in Colorado Springs back in 2013. And I thought I would be a journalist forever, and I loved it. I definitely didn't love the being on TV and wearing the anchor lady jacket. And what I loved was sitting down in somebody's living room and capturing their story. And my photographer and I, we had this rule that if somebody offered us sweet tea or a cup of coffee, we say yes. And in local news, you've got a 6:00 deadline. You got to get out of there, get the soundbite and go. And if somebody was going to make the time to make me a cup of coffee, I was going to take the time to drink it. And so I always wanted to stay longer, dig in deeper, but it didn't always allow for that. And then back in 2016, my dad got sick. And at that time, I was the evening anchor in Colorado Springs at a Fox affiliate here. My dad was just this amazing storyteller. He came over from Ireland during the oil boom in Texas to be a doctor in a small town. And he just had the greatest stories and he loved telling them. And so I was like, gosh, I should do this with my dad and just interview him. And at the time I was like, oh, but if I do that, he'll feel like it's the end and he'll give up hope, or maybe later, we'll do it later. He's still got more life to live. Never happened. And that is my biggest regret in life. And then after he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, he lived for another 7 months after his diagnosis. And at the time I had a little tiny baby, a couple months old. And so at his memorial service, I told my mom, I was like, hey, I hired a videographer to come to the funeral. And she was just like, you did what? She was like, you don't shoot video at funerals. That's not a thing. And I was like, it should be a thing. And so he was super discreet. He hung out in the back of the church, captured just the eulogy. The Irish do funerals well. So we had this party after the service where there were Irish dancers. It was at a little Irish bar in Houston.
And lots of toasting.
Lots of toasting. And the videographer set up in the corner of the bar and people sat down and told stories. Probably 30 or 40 people sat down and told really funny, awesome stories about my dad. A lot of them, I didn't know these stories. So we put that together as an hour-long film, and I watch it on his birthday every year. And at that time, it was just for me and my sisters. This wasn't meant to be a business. I was planning on being a news anchor till forever, till I retired. And then I had another friend who had a really tragic loss. Her brother died when he was 30 and had a little baby. And I was like, you know what? The only thing this little girl will know about her dad are the things we say. At his service, he was an Air Force pilot. All his Air Force buddies, everybody who loves him is in one place on one day, for one day only. This will never happen again. Get all those stories. And she had a really hard time finding some. It was in another state. And at the time I didn't have this business. she had a really hard time finding somebody who could do that. And so I think they ended up having somebody with a phone who was handy with cameras. I think it's probably still on a hard drive somewhere. But after that happened, I was like, this is something people need. And as much as I loved being a journalist, I feel like I'm still a journalist. I thought, I'd look around the newsroom. I'm like, there are 4 other women who could do this just as well as I can. I didn't feel like it needed me. Like I felt like I could get hit by a bus and I'd be replaced at the 6 o'clock news the next day, no problem, seamless. And where this felt much more personal to me, and I could make more of an impact.
So this was a mission. Wow. Just hearing your story just now, I know that I got goosebumps.
Oh,
I got goosebumps. And
yeah, I do too.
you know why? Because it's happened to all of us. I know everyone listening at that point when you told that story, probably some get teared up to say, me too. Why didn't I do that? And yeah, that's the funeral, the wake. But you're right, especially at the wake. That's where people really start to share. And to get those stories is so important. I didn't get my mother, my grandmother, my great aunt, who I was so close to them, but I did get my stepfather.
That's awesome.
He died in October, and at Christmas time, I invited his family over for dinner. And I surprised him and I played that for him, and they were just sobbing.
I bet.
Told me stories they didn't know.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like people apologize for the quality. I'm like, done is better than perfect every time. I was just had a very hard goodbye recently and did not get the chance to do a legacy film with this person. And so at her bedside, I'm holding her hand and I said, hey, do you mind if I hit voice memos? And I just asked her a couple of questions. I asked her to share a fond story of both of her sons, a fond story about her husband, and just a couple of stories. It's in voice memos on my phone. I would have loved to create a legacy film. Doesn't always happen, but you can still capture those stories. And you know what one client taught me? I thought, and I call it why wait stories because I waited and didn't get the chance. But I had a client, I learned something from my clients all the time, but I had a client who was in his 40s and he wanted to do a film about his grandfather who died before he was born. And so we got all his parents and aunts and uncles together. And it was the 5 kids telling the stories 40 something years later after he passed. So it's never too late to capture.
Lauren, that's brilliant. So for all these people that were probably tears were welling up like me and the goosebumps of it's too late. You're right. It's not too late. And I thought about that. One of the things I gave to his children was because he was married to my mom and then she had all his photos and the story of his father and grandfather up in Gaylord, Michigan, when they clear cut Michigan. And they had these big trees like sequoias. And they were on horse carts pulled by horses. And they had no idea about this. So even now it's not too late because people like you, I know some people, if they're real handy, they could probably do it because there's software, but pulling all the family members together and getting their stories, but then you can take those images and you can incorporate those. Can you talk about some of the films you've done like that and what different options and different ways they look then with the loved one while they're still living and then also with the loved one who's not there anymore? Yeah,
so they all look so different. There's one that I call the legacy film, and that can be one person sharing their stories. Sometimes it's a couple. Recently, I did one that was 10 people. It was 5 couples, so 5 siblings and their spouses who all came over from India within the span of like 20 years and all ended up in the same city. And they're so intentional about being close as a family and they do dinners weekly. And then different ways, they're also custom. Like one family was super musical, so all the background music was their original music, which I thought was so cool, especially being somebody I can't sing, can't play an instrument. I was so in awe of this family. And then I also do a film I call it the Life Lived film. And that's when we don't get the chance to interview the storyteller. That's usually, I think the best time to do it is a memorial service because of that same everybody there loves that person, and everybody walks into a memorial service with a story they're dying to tell. And so many times with the busyness of saying goodbye, the family isn't ready to hear it in that moment because so many people, they're feeling so many things. It's hard to sit down and listen to a story when you're in that kind of grief. But 6 months later, you might be in a place. So if we can capture all those stories at the service or right after, that's super special.
The memorial service, what is that now different than the funeral?
Oh, everybody calls a funeral something different. Some people call
Okay.
it a funeral, celebration of life.
Okay. Okay.
Looks like in your faith. I always encourage people create a space after the service where if everybody's gathering at a house or something comfortable, like people are less likely to sit down in the hallway of the church and do these stories, but create something afterwards that's very inviting of telling stories. We usually set up in a living room or a study, a little like off to the side, and then people sit down and talk about who that person was to them, the great story that they're dying to tell, and also what they want the kids, the grandkids, the family to know.
Oh, that's lovely. And you talked about at the Irish pub too.
Yeah.
And especially if they can get a private room in the Irish pub for this. I was at a memorial service for a loved one, and I've seen two of these where one, they were all from Netherlands. Mm-hmm. And it was the biggest celebration. The toasting just went on and on. Everyone wanted to do a toast and tell a story.
Yeah, I did one service that I thought was so cool. Oh, I can't remember what faith it was, but it was just different. And they had this stone. So they were in a circle holding a stone, and whoever had the stone would tell the story. Okay. And then they would pass the stone, and that person would tell a story. And it was I was a puddle by the end of it. It was just beautiful.
What about if you can't do the video? Everyone can't get together for the video, but they could do something with audio and then putting photos into it. Have you done that? Or
a family right now that they, over the years, have been collecting. I like to shoot and edit myself or in-house because I don't like to do the Zoom. I want it to look like a Netflix documentary. I've had some where people weren't together at the same time. So I hired a videographer in St. Louis and then somebody else in San Francisco. So we can still get professional footage of those people that can't be there at that time. But I have an interesting one coming up where they've been doing the interviews themselves just on the phone for years, but they wanted the kids and the grandkids to ask the questions. And I was like, that's awesome. But they don't know how to turn it into something cool. They're uploading all the footage into a drive for me, and then all their photos as well. And this one, I've never used any AI. I have very mixed feelings, but we've been toying with turning photos into video clips. And we've messed around with it with my dad's photos. So there's a photo of, I was probably 3 or 4. My sister's there. We're on the beach snuggling with my dad. And the photo comes to life for 4 seconds where the waves are going and he spins us around or something. So it doesn't mess with history. It just brings it alive. So I showed them what we could do. And they were like, this is cool. And I don't even know how I feel about it.
So some people might freak out about it too.
I don't know if I would do it on my family's legacy films, but it's an option. What do you think? And they were like, oh my gosh, that's super cool. Let's do it. So we're turning their interviews and their photos and everything into a film without even walking into their house.
Okay, one other thing. What about if people have the old video of the home movies? Incorporate that into your films.
Yes, and we have. So I've used footage from, it must have been probably the 50s. There was some just cute clips of the girls walking. I mean, they were probably great-grandparents now, or grandparents now, maybe great-grandparents, and them walking out of church in the fashions that they were wearing at the time. And it was a video clip that they just happened to have. So I usually encourage people to digitize everything. And it's amazing what you'll find when you do that, because people have boxes of beta tapes and film, and they don't even know so I did it with my own family. I sent it off to the company Legacy Box, where they'll digitize your photos, videos, everything. And this was after my dad had passed. And there was this 2-hour long interview of my grandmother in Ireland. My dad had hauled in the 80s or early 90s, probably, big video camera all the way to Ireland and interviewed her for 2 hours. I didn't even know this existed. And what a gem. Her talking about her child. It was just amazing. So yeah, we incorporate and sometimes we incorporate like historical footage. So if people are talking about 9/11 or World War II or D-Day, we'll use that footage as well in their films.
Oh my gosh. You mentioned something about why this is so important for women, or why did you mention that women in particular benefit from capturing stories? I thought that was interesting because our listeners are mostly women.
I think so much, especially for our parents and grandparents, so much of the story has been told by the man. When it comes to building businesses and building wealth and the travels, and I more and more find that it's the women's story, and maybe it's just because I'm a woman, but that resonates with me more. And I also find it very interesting because, especially for previous generations, they're seen as the support of their husband, but they're doing so much and have these incredible stories as well that they're not as eager to share when it's the story about the family and the couple and the family that they've created. So I find it more and more important that those women's stories are told.
Oh, you just made me think of my great-grandmother in Scotland. She was married to a gentleman, my great-grandfather, who was maybe they ended up emigrating to Canada. I think that's what ended up happening. But he was an insurance salesman. And maybe I shouldn't say this story, but he did something that he was embarrassed about. So then public embarrassment. So he quit doing that. He wouldn't work. And he had to work, but apparently, my aunt told me part of the story. But she gave me all this stuff in a china cabinet in the other room, and she had put who it was from, and a lot of it said skeet shooting, lawn bowling. So he just started doing all these sports where they would win like a plate or silver little knives with mother of pearl handles. So I have all this stuff, but she started telling me the story behind it, but how my great grandmother took the bull by the horns and she started a bed and breakfast in their house.
Oh, cool.
And so I have also all these tablecloths and all these napkins, and then a whole set of beautiful blue rose china. And there's multiple china cabinets. I don't have all of them. I just have 2 china cabinets full of stuff. But it all came from this bed and breakfast that she started. The woman saved the day. But people don't know that.
So funny. I send people this kind of brainstorming form so they can think about what stories they want to tell and what's important to them. And I'll say a little note saying, oh, he can speak to this. He'll speak to this. He'll speak to this. And I'm like, I want to hear you speak to this because your perspective is so cool. But yeah, your story reminded me of the very first legacy film I did when I started the business 5-ish years ago. And this woman, she was so cool. She had traveled. She had divorced young, when divorce was a really big deal, divorced young, and she traveled the world, like into her 80s, maybe, gosh, she was probably close to 90 when she passed, but she was always in another country, on some tour, doing something cool. And the film opened and closed with her adventures, and she was just showing me the artifacts, all the things she had brought home that were special to her, certain guidebooks and globes and different things. Adventure and travel was such a big theme of her life, and it was just so effortlessly woven into that. But yeah, I find when I talk to people, there's some kind of theme to their life, even if they don't realize it. But
right. I'm just and just so my kids get the china. They get the tablecloths. But if they understand the story and actually that they're all in this old cedar chest that Aunt Madge saved for years and years. And maybe and I wish I knew where the cedar chest originally came from, because it probably came from the great grandmother as well. But you're right, to be able to pass on those stories. As a financial advisor of many decades here, one of the things I do is I help people pass on their legacy, but it's their money. And I always thought it was so important to pass on the stories, the values. what, not just the money, but how they created the legacy, the money, the business, let's say, or the stuff to pass on, and what stories and the values and what they want their legacy to be, how they want to be remembered, and what values do they want their family to pass on to their generations too. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that may be included in a legacy video that you create?
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that because so there's a growing body of research that is showing that sharing stories creates these bonds and almost syncs up people's brains in some way. By sharing your stories, you're communicating your values to your kids and grandkids. And it's usually the older generation that's the wealth creators. And then these beneficiaries of that wealth, it's so important for them to know what their parent or grandparent or great grandparent sacrificed and did to make this happen. Yeah, I get goosebumps just thinking about the generation connections. When I started this, I was worried that the older generation would be like the finger wagging and back in my day, we had to do all this and you guys have it so good. And I haven't found that to be true at all. This one woman in her 90s, and she had lived through, remember the Great Depression, all those things. And she was like, back in my day, if your spouse had a job and you guys, a full-time job, you could buy a house, you could go on vacation twice a year, you could live a really good life. But now I hurt for the rising generation because that's not necessarily the case. You've got two people working full time and then also doing these side jobs and can barely make ends meet. So just the empathy. And I also thought, oh, these younger generations are going to be like, okay, boomer, like to the older generation. And that has not been what I have found at all. It's been so healing and connecting. And I've been lucky enough to be in the room when the families watch the film. And I love the conversations that happen afterwards. And yeah, it's just.
Is there a lot of emotion going on?
Oh, yeah. 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 One family who they had experienced a really tragic loss of one of their children decades ago. And I think they just had to move forward, put on their pants, go for their other kids, and really hadn't had time to sit down together and have some conversations that needed to happen. And so I think I know it's been very healing for some people. And yeah, that makes it very special as well.
There's so much wealth that's going to be passed on from the boomers.
Yes.
In this next generation. And I just think it's so important for people to be able to pass on those stories, especially of their relatives, because it's all going to be lost. And now everybody's just on their iPhones and they're not even remembering this stuff. So what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, that gives me goosebumps. It's funny, that made me think of a quote. I posted it to, I can't remember who said it, but it was, in the end, we all become stories. So I'm like, oh yeah, in the end, yeah, the money, the wealth, yeah, could be gone for a lot of families. But the stories, if we can keep those alive, that's, I feel like that's what matters. And that's what helps you rebuild.
People hear the stories, if the kids know about the story, especially if they could see a video of that story and see who that person really was, then those stories will get passed on.
Yeah.
And it could have a big impact on their values and how they live their lives. Yes,
and especially in all this is new within the last couple of decades. They're like, I have the video I told you about of my grandmother, but I don't have my great anything, but our grandkids and great grandkids will, and that's really cool. So I wonder how that might shift, or if it'll shift with keeping family wealth and family businesses alive and stuff like that. If you know what your great grandfather did to build it, like you might be more invested in your kids taking on that business. And yeah, I wonder if 100 years from now, 200 years from now, our kids and grandkids being able to see all this, I wonder how it'll shift everything.
If it's documented in a book or in a video, then they'll be aware of it. But again, for all of us who didn't sit down I used to visit my grandmother every weekend. And on the weekends, I would see her and she'd tell me all these she was a flapper. She was a wild gal. She had a stepmother because her mother died. She was given as a servant to a wealthy family when she was like 14 years old, and she told me about that. And the gal was really not nice to her. And then finally, I think at 16, 17 years old, she and her sister went to Toronto and they got a room together, and they said there were bed bugs, and all they had is a little burner, and they would get a can of beans and a pork chop and split it, and they were chocolate dippers, and they would eat the chocolate during the day because they were so hungry. But imagine that story. But I wish now I know it, and I better make sure my kids know it.
That made me think of, so when I was a reporter in Lubbock, Texas, my first job and TV news pays notoriously badly. But yeah, my first job, this was in the 2000s, made $20,000 in Lubbock, Texas as a TV reporter. And so I love Chipotle. I love Chipotle burritos. And I would only get guacamole on payday. If it wasn't payday, no guac, because you have to pay $1.50 extra for guac. And it's funny, now I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and we'll go to Chipotle and they're like, oh, we want extra cheese and extra meat and extra guac. And I'm like, it's not payday. And I always tell them that story. I'm like, when I was in my first job, and yeah, they think it's very funny. They were like, you couldn't pay an extra $1.50 for guac.
My great aunt would have my mother sit in the car so she could go inside, and she would have put a penny on the windowsill. And so she didn't have to put it into the meter. So if the police came, my mother would have to put that in there. But she had gone through the Depression.
Yeah.
And when she passed, she had $1 million. And she had said to my uncle, I will get a job if I can save my paycheck and we live on one income.
Yeah.
So we have, as parents, we have a responsibility for our family to pass on our legacy. For those listening, what are just a couple of tips, maybe how they can get started on their own? And then I do want you to share how people contact you, connect with you.
This is right before the holidays. Everybody's together. Think of Christmas dinner or whatever holiday you celebrate. There's probably somebody who's not going to be there next year. That gives me goosebumps just to think about. Just like, if you're at dinner and you guys are having great conversation, just, hey, pull out your phone and say, would you guys care? This is fun. Would you guys care if I hit voice memos and we asked a couple of questions or told a couple of stories? It's so low, like you don't have to pay anybody to do that. You all have a phone in your pocket right now. Done is better than perfect. Yeah, and that'll be a treasure. Or even better, if you want to set up a little camera, and you don't even have to have all the gear, the microphones, the light stands, just set it up, lean it against a vase and ask grandma a question.
Yeah.
Even just, hey, and it doesn't have to be, oh, all the wisdom you want to share. It can be like, oh, tell me, you've got this scar on your hand. Tell me the story behind the scar. It can be something fun and silly. And it doesn't have to be all the questions. It can be just one. Just ask one question.
Oh, and you know what? I'm going to give a tip. They can go find some of the old pictures and bring it out. This is planning ahead and say, Grandma or Uncle Leo, let's say, tell me about this picture. What's going on here? Because they will love that.
Yes. Oh, does that sound like a Christmas dinner you want to be at?
Yeah. Yes.
Fun. So I have no time in my life for small talk. Let's have the conversations. I think the holidays.
Turn off the TV and let's all do this
together. I love it.
Great. Put the iPhones down unless it's video and grandma.
Exactly.
Oh, wonderful. So this has just been so rich and I've loved it. I've had goosebumps so many times.
Same. Yeah.
So exciting. Thank you so much for being here.
For having me. This was a delight.
How can people reach you and how do they find out more?
Yes, my website, the business is Why Wait Stories, and that's the website, whywaitstories.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. And I have excerpts. A lot of films are very private, so people don't want clips out there, and that is absolutely fine. I very much respect that and don't try to put everything on social media. So there's many that just live in their own homes. But I do have some excerpts on my website and on social that people can watch.
Oh, lovely.
All starts with a conversation. There's a little let's chat, and it's super low pressure. We just we talk on the phone or on Zoom or however people want to talk, or over coffee if they're local, and then we go from there.
Oh, so you just said, because I think it kind of cut out, so they can schedule a meeting with you, a phone call?
Yep. So there's a let's chat button.
Okay.
I'll ask a couple of quick questions just so I have an idea of what the story that they want to capture. And then we have a conversation. And then if they decide to move forward with a legacy film, they get the brainstorming form. And I ask that they spend a couple of weeks kind of thinking things. I don't want people to leave the film or the shoot thinking, oh shoot, there was that story I wish I had told. So I try to, on the front end, make sure that doesn't happen. And then after we do the shoot, they can expect the film in about 2 to 3 months.
Wow, perfect. Wonderful. Okay, great. Okay, it's been so great, Lauren. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And everyone, we're so thrilled that you're here. If you want to learn more about Smart Women's Empowerment and all of our guests and get access to our free courses and all the other goodies, go to joinsmartwomen.com. Until our next show, go out and live with more purpose, passion, and prosperity.